Meanwhile, I'm Jessica. I'm a developer advocate at Honeycomb, and I'm here to answer any questions you have. You can put questions in chat. You can unmute and just say them. It's fine. Here, I made a poll. Does that work? Do you see a poll? Ooh, okay. So the poll says most people have just started. Perfect. You're totally the target audience. One person hasn't used Honeycomb yet. Also cool. And one person has found it useful. Excellent. I am, of course, in the last category of I've used it long enough that I can't do without it. I've actually only had Honeycomb for a year, really. Since I've been at Honeycomb is when I've got to use it on real applications. But I kind of always understood how important it is because I care about systems and I care about seeing into them. And how many people have kids? Yes. You know how when they're babies, all you have is like happy, not happy. You've got like crying, not crying, and that's it. And then when they're crying, you have to figure out what to do. And sometimes they're dry, they're fed, they're warm enough, they're just doomed. And then they grow into toddlers and they learn things like more and wet and cold, and then words. And it's like, I feel like observability is like that. It's teaching our system to tell us what's wrong. Yeah. Yeah, kind of make it grow up into at least a toddler. Some of them I think are teenagers.
Makes sense. I have a question, actually.
Great.
Can I take it? Yeah, I'm the one. I haven't used Honeycomb yet.
Okay.
But I'm looking into it for a company. One of the things that we run into a lot of times is where we'll have a series of endpoints, URL endpoints, like many, I guess, high cardinality. But with the system we're using now, that's all just sort of get to a certain point and they're all bundled up into one sort of metric. So you can't really filter out. Is there a way with Honeycomb to be able to drill down into individual API endpoints URLs with that?
Yes. In fact, that's pretty much our core use case. I mean, not URLs specifically, but fields that have too many values for you to be able to afford to metric all of them. I will share screen. Let's see this screen, and then we'll get this up. Oh yeah. Okay, so here's a query that I was running earlier. In this case, I'll start from the beginning. I have like this demo project, and I was wondering like what languages are there? And I know this uses OpenTelemetry, and OpenTelemetry sends us a field called library.name. So I can group by that. Group by is the secret magic. It's the first secret magic of Honeycomb. Because first just count requests. Whenever I go to new query, the first thing I usually do is just count. And then I put something interesting in the group by. Usually that's name. What are the names of events? See how many there are? There's a lot. It actually only showed me the first 1,000, I think. But in this case, I wanted to know what languages are around. And one clue to that is the OpenTelemetry field library.name. So I can see we've got some ASP.NET, gRPC, that's probably also Go. This is definitely Go. Some other things aren't. Sending library.name. In fact, most of them aren't. Tut. But let's group by URL because you were looking at URL. All data sets in, not everything is populating URL. Let's try target as well. Yeah, a lot more things are populating HTTP target. And you can see here that like HTTP target has a lot of different values because actually the product ID is in there. And this is a demo site, so it only has a dozen product IDs, but you might have thousands. And that's okay. You can find whatever you want. And if there's a limit, I can do stuff like, oh yeah, this is ordered by count. So the most frequently accessed product IDs are showing up in the HTTP target. And then you'll be like, whoa, I want this one. And that puts something in here. Oh, right, it was grouped by HTTP URL too. That's fine. So I can see that added to the where clause, I can get all the rows for just one specific value. And then I can see like, okay, what service is involved? Service name, throw that in there. It's all the front end service is receiving that URL. Then I can go to the front end service and I can do more stuff in here. Like I can go home and be like, front end service, how you doing? It's got some stuff. It's got some latency. It's got a few errors. And I should tell you that when you have a zillion values like that, where's that nice list of values? There. When you have a bunch of values, we call that a high cardinality field, which is a confusing term, but it just means there's a lot of different values. We also call it high dimensionality when there are a lot of different attributes, a lot of different keys. So these are all the key names that are on some of the events. And we don't care how many of those you have. There's a limit, but it's in the thousands. And then within those, container ID, there's a lot of containers. We don't care how many values because we're storing the original events. We're not storing counts. The metrics monitoring time series database stuff is all storing counts. So it matters how many counts. This doesn't.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Cool. Who else has a question?
So you mentioned high cardinality. Some of our data's got a couple thousand. It sounds like within your range, but maybe pushing it.
That was dimensionality. That's how many different attributes. You're only going to hit the limit there if you accidentally use a value as a key. Like if you meant to send timestamp with a value of date.now, but you actually sent date.now with the value of timestamp, that's when you'll hit that limit. For the different values in the field, there's no limit at all.
But for the number of different fields,
yeah, for this list.
Mm-hmm, yeah,
right. And we only have a limit because somebody accidentally put a value as a key.
Yeah,
and it was ridiculous.
Okay, so a couple thousand actual dimensions is not a big problem.
Nope, that's totally normal.
Okay,
that's fantastic. Actually, the more one reason we changed our pricing a few years back so that we don't care how much data you put in your event. I mean, there's a limit of a couple kilobytes, I think. No, more than a couple. But you can have as many attributes as you want because you get more value the more you put in there.
Mm-hmm.
And we want you to get that value. Also, we want you to be able to predict how much how many events
What
you
it's going to
need.
cost.
Yeah. You need to be able to predict. Well, one, we won't surprise you by charging you for overages until you've been over for a long time. Well, we still won't surprise you. But
You will have warned us.
yeah, there will be human contact. As soon as you are being surprised by how many events you're sending. But how many events you're sending is something you could possibly measure and predict. You can count those. You can multiply by, we expect this much usage increase. It's going to have this effect. But we don't want you to have to think about how much stuff you put in there. Some of our events have nonsense in them, in my opinion. Looking at them now, I'm sure they were useful. So what was I looking at the other day in dog food? I think it was Shepherd. It was Bassett. And I was looking for see, group by name. This is another thing that I always do. Start with count, group by name, find the spans. And I was looking for evaluate SLOs and burn alerts. I was looking for SLO burn alerts. Name contains alert. Here we go. So I was wondering, like, what does it look like when, exactly why, I had some code, exactly why do we send a burn alert on an SLO? How do we like project out the time that we think it's going to be before you burn all your error budget and stuff? And in the code, I went and looked at it and I saw a whole bunch of add this to the span, add this to the span, add this to this span. So then I can come into Honeycomb and I can see all of that and I can get like real information about how this calculation is happening. And the fields I'm looking for are, look at them all. app.burnalert.creator. That helps me find the right one. But there were here, these P window ones. No, there's a bunch in here that are like ridiculously long. Those are just counts. Some of these are arrays and they're kind of a ridiculous amount of information. But it gets to be a lot. Basically at Honeycomb, we tend to, anywhere you would put in a debug log, throw an attribute on the span. And then it's one, more organized than debug logs because they're all tied together. This is one execution of the function and you can see all of this in there. And you can go look at it. And then you happen to have it in production, sampled probably in production. But it's, again, more useful than just a debug log. We do trim them a bit, but where was one of these fields? Oh, well, I can't find the ones that had a big array in it. Oh, here we go. Total array. Haha, look at all that. Oh my gosh.
Absolutely vital. Every single byte there.
Now, I admit, if I happen to be in that code and changing it for some other reason and didn't need this anymore, I might comment that one out. But I mean, we're an observability company. We have an excuse to go a little overboard. However, if people were complaining that their burn alerts were going off at unexpected times, I've got all the information I need to debug that. I can go check how that calculation is really going and is it as expected. And I could even group by this if I really wanted. Maybe I could find out who has all zeros. It's a lot. Ryan has a question in the chat. Higher level pragmatic concepts. Good guidance for when to make a new data set. Okay. versus, okay, I'm going to start with the make a new data set. So recently, in April in Honeycomb, we shifted our data organization scheme so that you get a new data set for every service. Let's switch over to demo team. This illustrates this. All the data sets in here are all the services. And these are created automatically whenever we get an event with a new service.name field. So if I want to see all the services, I can query across everything or across particular services. So let's group by service name and what services do we have here? Throw a count in there. Okay, so we have the front end service and the product catalog and blah, 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 blah. So you get a data set per service. However, while you would typically run queries, like I can go to the front end and I can be like, okay, give me root spans in the front end. Parent ID does not exist means this is the top level of the trace. This is the root span. That's the trick. Okay, and I can count these or look at their latencies or whatever. But as soon as I go, actually, I can just click in here and get to a trace. Look at a trace, I'm seeing across all those data sets.
Oh, I think my question might have been from like 6 months ago based on looking at the UI. Because I remember feeding an environment variable that that said what data set I was interested in. Okay. Interesting.
Yes. So we have
So
pretty much
that's
solved that for
not
you.
relevant, really.
Oh yeah, but I'm thrilled to talk about it.
Yeah.
As you can see. Yeah, because we had previously there was a conflict when traces were only within a data set, you needed to send everything to the same data set to get the full trace.
Mhm.
So now we've added this higher level concept of environment. So you can separate your data. Now, this is mine. So I have banana and potato. Those are not normal names. Prod, that's a normal name. Typically you'd have test. You might have various people's local environments or one local environment that you all send to from your computers.
Mhm.
Don't know what Wiseline is.
Okay, so that one is more the staging dev prod environment level meaning of environment. Okay.
Yeah, where the different events have nothing to do with each other. They would never fit in the same trace.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So you want everything for a trace to go to the same environment, but then it naturally gets or automatically gets divided into data sets by service.
So really that top level, that one's the envar is the one with poodle or prod or
yeah, so like in this is, I think prod is no, we have an environment now, but there's some, let me go to an old team, switch teams, Jessitron, that's an old team. I've got this classic environment and this is old style. And here all the data sets are separate. And so I had to set that environment variable to decide where the events were going to go. And now that's called classic and I can add a new environment. And when I send to it, the events will divide themselves up by service.
oh yeah, there it is. I'm just seeing it on my account. Okay, neat.
Sweet. Great. Let's see, modernity. That's my banana potato demo team. This is the first one that I created after environments and services. Let's see, you have more in your question. Yes, so staging prod is environment, front end, back end is service, and that'll divide up into data sets for you. The nice thing about that is that triggers and SLOs and most queries are just one service. And so it kind of like organizes things better. Distinguishing things using attributes of events. And yeah, we do a lot of that. So we distinguish things by service name. One of the core challenges of Honeycomb is, okay, I can query by anything. What do I query by? What's interesting? We're working on ways to do that. even more, but I can show you my tricks. One, I start with root spans, which is trace.parent ID does not exist. And then I group by name, because that's always interesting. What kind of things are happening? And then I can see this front end service has these going on: currency, product, cart, checkout. And then I ask whoever's data this is, which of these are important? What do you care about? I mean, one thing to look at is what's slow. So I can, if I add the P90 of duration as a graph, then I can order by P90 duration. And I can say, which of these are the slowest? I also kind of always throw in a heat map of duration because it's so communicative, because it tells me not just what's slow, but like, what's the variation? Oh, another thing that's important is once you get this group by going on, you can see all the values and a bunch of charts that honestly are a lot of squiggly lines right now. But if you hover over the different lines in the table, it brings out just that group. So I can see the distribution of cart checkout durations in the heat map. I can see product ID. Those are a lot lower, but there's more of them. And cart accesses are, well, there's a lot of variation in the duration of cart. I wonder why. All right, let's wonder why. Show only where name is cart. Okay, now I'm looking at just the cart ones, and I can go to bubble up and I can be like, is there anything different about these slow ones? Aha. And okay, so bubble up, Honeycomb does a statistical analysis of all the fields on the events in the box versus the events outside the box. What's different? This is probably a good indication number of products. I mean, it's a cart call, so it seems like that would make it slower if there's a lot of products. Seems like the ones in the box are mostly 5. Actually, in the ones out of the box, it's sometimes not populated. This is generated data, and now I want to go change my generation script to like not always buy 5 things. But this is one way to find out what's important. Look at the slow ones, bubble up, what's different? These little donuts are like how often it's populated. Bubble up is totally about showing you which fields are interesting. So it's a great place to start. And if I wanted, I could group by this field and be like, okay, go over to results. There's either 5 and they're that slow, or it's not populated. Why is it not populated? Don't know. Let's look at a trace for one of those. But it's faster when it's not populated. Show only events in this group. Click on something, anything, get a trace. Oh, it looks like we're doing add item here. I wonder why add item is also called /cart. Weird. Which is fine. Anytime I say weird and I wonder why is an opportunity to ask someone who knows the app.
Is it the post?
Oh yeah,
method is post.
Good idea. Let's look at method. In the trace view, I can get at the values of fields either individually over here on the right, which is a good place to review them and just see what's populated and what I might want to look at. It's a lot easier to read than the raw data view, in my opinion. Oh, and you can search fields like this. It searches keys and values. But also, if you add them up here, then it shows you for all of them. So here we have a post get product. That one went to get product and then add item. Whereas I could, let's see, I want to find a trace of one of the ones that's not one of the slower ones that had number of products populated. Okay, so instead of num products do not exist, I want num products does exist. And yeah, these are the slower ones. Click somewhere, get a trace. And this looks like a completely different cart call. This one's actually checkout. Okay, and this tells me that like, oh, what the, how is checkout a get? We have this concept called mean time to what the fuck at Honeycomb. And we consider our product a success if within 15 minutes of looking at the data in Honeycomb, you're like, what? I didn't know we were doing that. Why the heck is this a get? Anyway, so then I would go complain to the app developers and then they would tell me some historical reason. Ooh, okay. Anybody else have questions, or I'll go on to Ryan's second one. Okay, Brian was also wondering about the sample rate. Ooh, let's go look at usage. Okay, so to find pick good values for the sample rate, you can start by not sampling and finding out how many events you have, or not sampling in a test environment. But we do this thing where like we don't charge you for your 2 or 3 busiest days a month. So for short term, you can send a lot. And well, if you're using Refinery for sampling, Refinery is our tail-based sampler, which we have open sourced because it's really good at making super dynamic decisions after a full trace has been received. Do we send this one or not? So you can always send errors, for instance, and only 5% of the time or whatever send successes. And then this usage page can show you how many of your events, how many you're receiving. So clearly I started running this around here. I'm over my daily events targets every day. I should probably like buy more events. In my cases, it's an internal team. How many events per environment? So you could see if somebody's running performance test and you're getting a lot more from staging than you expected. Yeah, which front end looks like it's sending the most. So maybe I should, on one hand, I could bump sample rate, but if I just sampled higher in front end, then there would be a bunch of broken traces. That's where the tail-based sampling comes in, where by tail, we mean considering the full trace. Although front end being the input point, if you're not, the simplest way to trace is just to decide at the beginning, based on the trace ID, I'm either going to send it or not. But then you don't get any higher rate of sampling on errors than on successes. Usually you want to see all the errors in detail. And let's see, how do I look at sample rate? When you're in usage mode, you can run queries and actually see, you can see the sample rate inside the traces. So if I go to front end from here, that's just the settings. How do we switch into usage mode? I actually don't know if I've done this before, or not in a long time. But there's a field in all the data sets called sample rate that you can't see in regular mode. I don't remember how to get you turn on usage mode. Oh, well, it's a thing. The sample rate field always tells Honeycomb at what rate this particular kind of event was sampled. And then in the regular graphs, when you do the counts like this, Honeycomb is always multiplying that event times its sample rate. So if you're only sending 5%, the sample rate's going to send 20, and Honeycomb counts that event as 20 in all queries. So it's clever that way. So if you want to, when I count these total spans, that's not how many events I'm sending to Honeycomb. Watch out for that, because that's the events times their individual sample rate.
So that's very similar to like StatsD, where you have access to both the sampled and the 10x, or I can't remember, or 6x or whatever it was for the 10-second time window, right?
Oh, right, where you have a count per time window. Yeah. And we don't have that like time window on an event, because it just happened.
Number instead.
Yeah, the sample rate takes place of changing the granularity of the sampling of the time series number recording. But this usage mode down here will help you figure out what sample rate you want. And then I think most customers wind up running Refinery to once they hit the part where they really want to sample at different rates based on what happened later, not just what happened in the root event or the root span. Yeah, you can do like, is it called head-based sampling? I don't know, decide up front when you receive the request that you can pass down with the trace context propagation in the standard propagation of the trace ID as an HTTP header. You can be like, we're sampling this or we're not. But the tail-based is the coolest. It's a whole nother thing to run though. So you don't have to start there. Anybody have more questions? Oh, there it is. I found the usage mode button. It was behind the Zoom window. It was behind the chat. Okay, now I'm in usage mode. Now I can average the sample rate because I can see it. And I can see that my sample rate is 1. I'm not sampling. Maybe I should. Okay. Peter, did you start to have a question?
Yeah, the system's looking very responsive and nice from that point of view. Sort of what size data set are you looking at, and does that matter? Would I have this same effect on a larger data set if this is not that big? And then my real question is, when a new event arrives, how quickly will it get reflected in your analysis?
Good question. Okay, let's test this. I'll start with the second part, and let's see, how do I get out of return to normal mode? There we go. That's what I was looking for. So if I go to my boards, then I'll have a link to the checkout behavior. I'll have a link to the front end of this silly app. It doesn't have a real URL. Mac Control-C, new tab. Okay, so let's buy something. Add to cart. Cart. Apparently add to cart as a post, and somehow we're doing checkout as a get. Hey, give me my cart. It didn't work. Oh well, add to cart. It's not a very good app. It's just OpenTelemetry is, I think we got this from Microsoft originally, and it's going to be an OpenTelemetry standard demo. Oh, here, now I'm at checkout. Okay. If I put discount code in here, let's see, Peter, you're the discount code. And we look at that, and then we go over here, and I'm going to go to the front end service, and I'm going to query by discount code count. Yeah, there you are. I should have like set the query up first so that I could get to it faster because it's there already.
Mhm.
So our standard is like, it should be there in 5 seconds. I think our SLO may say 10. Hold on, let me check our SLOs. So here's dog food. This dog food is the environment where we run a separate instance of Honeycomb to monitor Honeycomb. Queries in dog food are slower because we under provision. They're just slower. And we did that on purpose to save ourselves money. And also we kind of want dog fooding to be less advantaged. If stuff gets slow, we want to see it be slow in dog food first. And we do. Right. So let's see. Latent query freshness. The delay from ingest to content visible in queries is less than 70 seconds. Oh, that's really long. So apparently we don't complain for like a whole minute, but the typical time is more like 5 seconds. Ooh, how do we measure this? Retriever timings column. Okay, so we have a whole data set for this apparently. SLOs, retrievers. Yeah. Give me the, it's just called SLI. So we have our, here it is. So we're looking at this lag shepherd max milliseconds. I don't know how this isn't based on our shepherd data set. So apparently we have our own data set where we specifically put this in there, and we can check. But let's see what that lag usually is. So now that I'm in the retriever timings data set, I'm going to put new query and let's do a heat map of that lag shepherd max. Run query. Aha.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's usually down here at less than 2 seconds. So 2 seconds is this bottom bit. And sometimes it's quite a bit slower. And I'm curious why. But it doesn't look like we have enough attributes to tell. Sad. I can glance through the schema over here and, oh, Kafka partition. Some days that makes a big difference. Some days we do the bubble up and it's like partition 16 is slow. Yeah, lag shepherd. I know that changed. Okay, so we don't have enough attributes on here for me to tell why, but you can see that
Really fast. Yeah.
Yeah. It's usually under 2 seconds. As you get larger data sets, it does get a little slower. We expect our queries to return within the time it takes you to take a sip of coffee. So like 10 seconds is acceptable. If it's a minute, that's like, I think our timeout is 5 minutes. But a minute is, we're not cool with that. There's 2 factors of like how long it takes. Well, okay, there's more than 2. If you're grouping by a lot of different fields, it's going to take longer. And that's just fair. That's your choice. If you want to group by 4 different things. Most tools don't even support that. If your data set is bigger, it does matter. So this is one reason we did the environments and services thing, so that you could have all your traces together and connected while your data sets were smaller, and divided in a way that you usually care about how your service is doing. So it's a useful division. The other way to get a really slow query is to extend the time range. But we've mitigated this significantly, and it no longer makes nearly as much difference as it used to do, because under the hood, when we access old partitions of data, ones that have been moved up to S3, we spin up lambdas for each of those. So this query actually, if I go over to dog food and I look at retriever, let me type, whatever, retriever traces. I can find some Lambda ones. Name contains Lambda. And so for long queries, Lambda, whatever, traces, just give me a trace with a span that contains Lambda. Traces is also slower, especially in dog food, and especially because these traces tend to be really, really big. Yes, this one has 160,000 spans. It will not show me that many. It will only show me 64,000 closest to the root. 2.7 million spans. We spent up a lot of lambdas for that one. But let's look at this reasonable one with only 2,000 spans. Yeah, so as we need to access older data, that used to like linearly increase the length of your query. But now, yeah, fetch raw from Lambda. We do, here's an invoke. Oh yeah, and the service switches to Lambda and the color switches. So we scale how much we pay for running your query instead of scaling the length of your query.
Yeah.
So that's
No,
fun.
sweet, nice technology or nice partitioning of it.
Thanks.
Yeah.
It is really cool, isn't it?
Yeah.
that our database uses AWS Lambda. Oh, Bethany has stuck the survey link in the chat, and there's like a secret phrase or a secret word and in the survey, and so that's, you need to enter honeybee for that so that we know you were like really here and this is not a spam response for people who want 1,000 t-shirts.
I think t-shirts are not deliverable in India.
Say that again, Uday.
Hi, I'm from India. Like it's very late for me. Like you were discussing about t-shirts, so I just told. One day I was like checking, so it was not deliverable in our capital city in India. Like we were trying to get it in Delhi. So yeah, I'm not sure.
T-shirts are harder. Thanks.
Anyway, that's not concerned. I'm having a question, and
great.
I love to hear that. I'm working with my. Actually, I have started exploring Honeycomb from last 2 days, so I don't have much idea. It's totally completely new for me. I am here to just learn about how can we send logs of a app from there to Honeycomb.
Okay, good question. So if you already have logs coming out of your app and you want to send them to Honeycomb, this is useful. And in our docs under send data, OpenTelemetry is ideal for traces, but when you want to get logs, it depends somewhat on the kind of logs, but you can always use Honeytail. So Honeytail will just read the log files you have and ship them to Honeycomb.
Okay. So if those logs will be sent to the Honeycomb, I was more interested. So let's say NPs are occurring in my app, and I want to grab those stack traces, those null point exception, and to do some analysis, to do some manipulation on that, so that I can notify to the developers. Okay, so there is some issue. Go and fix that. Something like that I'm trying to do. So with this Honeytail, I will be able to get the logs, and can I think I can run the query from Honeycomb to get those NP stack trace. Am I right?
Yes. So let's see, where do I have some stack traces? All data sets, exception.stacktrace. Yeah, so here's an example of a stack trace field.
Oh, nice.
And let's see. Oh yeah, so here I've counted the stack traces. There's one of each of these. And then let's see, I just want to see this one event. I'm gonna take these out, show only where stack trace exists. Okay. And then if I like click on one of these, give me a trace. I actually want to see, oh, let's go to raw data. Here we go. So here's all the 4, I think it was, records that had a stack trace in this time frame. And yeah, you can see the stack traces. One thing that, so for your use case, when you want to let the developers know about a stack trace, you might set up a trigger.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see, triggers. Yes, create your first trigger. Okay, what data sets were those in? Raw data, tell me the service name. Okay, recommendation services is throwing these errors. So if I want to set, oh, not an SLO, I want a trigger for recommendation service. And then I can make the query. And what I just want to do is count where count exception dot stack trace exists. And then if count is greater than 0 in the last 15 minutes, then tell someone, or maybe I'll like put something in Slack.
Okay, nice. So I think it's working on the basis of matrices. What if I want to send that exact log? Like, sorry, I mean to send that
The stack
exact
trace.
stack trace.
The notification that they're going to get is going to link them back to this graph. And then they'll need to click on the graph in Honeycomb to see the stack trace.
Oh, okay.
So the notifications that we have are like, come look at this.
Oh, okay, cool. Thanks. Nice.
Yeah,
okay,
they're
and now
not super customizable.
Yeah. Nice. I will be coming to the first question about that Honeytail. So can you just give me a little bit more exposure on that Honeytail so
Okay.
that it will be a little bit easy for me to go through.
Sure. So well, let's see. First of all, if you have Logstash or FluentD and you're using those, you can use the agents that are standard. Honeytail is a very generic one. And so if you have just logs that aren't one of the standard log collectors and you got what you got and you need to work with it, then you get to write regular expressions. And I think by default in Honeytail, you can define like what fields to look for and it'll do its best. But to use Honeytail on custom logs is its own game. And I can help you, or our customer support people can totally help you with that. Right. Okay. So if you have some standard logs, the docs will have the options for you. But if you need to write a custom regular expression, then you can accommodate whatever the heck logs you have. But it's interesting.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. Let's see, we have about 5 minutes left. Does anybody else have a last question? Peter.
Sounds like you're with the FluentD or Logstash components, you're kind of you could act as a drop-in for regular logs in addition to like open telemetry traces.
Yeah, totally. As long as they're structured logs.
Okay.
If they aren't structured, they're going to be really boring in Honeycomb.
Only vaguely related. if we're running parts of our services in Google, and
Cloud.
we're using Google services, do you have a way of pulling log things out of Google services?
That's a good question. I don't know. I'll have to get back to you on that one.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Write that down.
For the stuff that we run, some of the stuff we run there, we have fuller control, but once you start, like how do you get your logs out of your lambdas that are running your queries? It's that kind of problem.
Yes, and we have for Lambda, there's a lovely OpenTelemetry integration called the OTel layer, so that you can put this like underneath your Lambda code and it will send the traces. Traces are basically logs with extra structure.
Yeah,
they're logs plus. Yeah, so sometimes there's generic integrations. The worst case is when you have to add the code yourself to send the traces and logs. But OpenTelemetry has a constantly growing list of abstractions of libraries and yeah, what do you call plugins and things to make this easy in different frameworks, different environments. When in doubt, if you can make an HTTP request, you can send an event.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for coming to this. It was a really good conversation.
Thank you for hosting.
And let's see. What am I supposed to point out for upcoming events? Bethany, do we have anything for upcoming events? I know we're doing the intro to all observability workshop next month. I think July 15th. You're always welcome to pop into office hours, honeycomb.io/office hours, and you can sign up to talk to me or Liz or Martin. Martin is in England, so the time zones might be better for some people.
Yep, that will be better for me. It's 11:30 p.m.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Thank you.
Hey
for
Jess,
coming.
it's shared in here. I can chime in with the upcoming events and we'll follow up in our email. But yes, we have another authors cut series coming up on July 2nd. So that's going to be focused on debugging with the core analysis loop and what to build versus buy. So that will be the authors of our O'Reilly observability book. Then we have the 101 workshop that Jessica mentioned on July 14th. That's kicking off at 8 a.m. We will also have an advanced instrumentation workshop later in the month on July 20th. That one's at 9 a.m. run by the team on our solutions architect side. So we'll be sure to link all of those events in the follow-up email to everyone on this call.
Cool. And thanks, Bethany, for posting in the chat. Thank you, everyone.